Egyptomania, the 2,000 plus year old civilization of Egypt reanimated into the modern world. Also Egyptian revival. November 1922, there was no shortage of conversation topics over the Thanksgiving table, not with the recent discoveries made by archaeologist Howard Carter.
Valley of the Kings, last resting place of the pharaohs. For thousands of years, people had looked here for treasures from ancient Egypt. On the 26th of November, 1922, an English archaeologist, a certain Howard Carter, realized his dream. He uncovered a previously unknown burial chamber. At last, I've made a fantastic discovery. Carnarvon at once traveled to the site with Carter. Together, they broke open the walled-up doorway, sealed for more than 3,000 years. It was the tomb of the boy king, Tutankhamun. Jewels, toys, furniture, more than 1,000 items.
Newspaper headlines captured attention, but it was the photos that made King Tut. And Harry Burton became the photographer to King Tut. And here are some of the photos that he took. It was this single event that dazzled imaginations and would eventually change the design and fashion world over the next 2 decades, from roughly 1920s to the 1940s. Egyptian motifs and geometric shapes inspired a newly created movement that was later to be named Art Deco. Here you can see the Chrysler Building is finding inspiration from a papyrus decree. The Cartier clock was modeled after a replica of the Gate of Ptolemy. But this wasn't the first time Egypt romanced the world. Roughly 125 years earlier, another prominent figure uncovered a piece of ancient Egypt. His name was Napoleon. During his Egyptian campaign, one of his soldiers found the Rosetta Stone. Scholars accompanying Napoleon created illustrations in journals that transfixed Europeans. These pieces shown here come from the 19th century and the first Egyptian revival. And here's some more examples of 19th century pieces, and one modeled after the hypostyle form. These 2 chairs have sphinx-style feet and chair arms of winged beings, possibly Horus or a griffin. Can't really tell. Egyptian chairs typically had no back, but for pharaohs, a back was a sign of respect and authority. And one of its stranger manifestations were the mummy unwrapping parties held in England. And it's exactly what it sounds like. The Egyptian revival eventually made its way from Europe to the United States. The Washington Monument was inspired by the obelisk, for example. In 1905, a design maven, Louis Comfort Tiffany, showed what could be done with the aesthetics of Egypt and the exoticness of it. Americans began to take liberties. This here is his estate in Long Island called Lorton Hall. Perhaps the biggest liberties were committed by the owners of the theaters. The first Egyptian theater was Grauman's in Los Angeles. There were many theaters to follow. Within Art Deco, the ideas of ancient Egypt were Americanized. The flapper dress borrowed the silhouette from Egypt but became its own thing. It was Egyptomania and it was exotic, a backlash to Victorian and Art Nouveau styles. And by the 20s, it was appropriated. Symbols and shapes were borrowed and made modern. But before it got too out of hand, charging in like Alexander the Great came Le Corbusier and fellow architects who didn't value ornamentation. They finally conquered Art Deco's Egyptian influences and introduced modernism.